So there is a message sitting on Truth Social right now that every NATO defense minister has already read, reread, and forwarded to their prime ministers. And the message goes like this: NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice. 3 exclamation points, all caps, posted by the sitting president of the United States. The same country that built NATO from scratch, wrote the checks that kept it running for 77 years, and pointed its nuclear arsenal at the Soviet Union so that 32 other nations could sleep without hearing boots in the streets. Now here is where we are. That guarantee, the guarantee that held together the entire architecture of Western security since 1949, is cracking loudly, publicly, and at absolutely the worst possible moment. Now we are going to walk through exactly what happened, why it happened, and what the numbers actually tell us. Because what looks on the surface like a social media outburst is something far more serious. This is the moment the Western Alliance stopped pretending, so to understand what just broke, you need to understand what triggered it. On February 28th, the United States launched a coordinated military campaign against Iran under an operation called Epic Fury. The targets were Iranian nuclear facilities and military infrastructure. The objective was simple and non-negotiable: no Iranian nuclear capability, ever. Now Trump announced the operation himself. He called it necessary, inevitable, and overdue. And here is what he assumed would follow. Allies fall in line, the coalition forms, the operation runs on a united front. That is how it always worked. That is not what happened. Within days of the strikes, NATO member after NATO member began refusing to participate. Germany declined to contribute any forces. France closed its airspace to American military aircraft operating in the region. Italy and Spain did the same. The Netherlands, a NATO founding member, one of the original 12 signatories in 1949, refused to send naval vessels to support the U.S. effort to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is the critical piece here. Iran did not simply absorb the strikes. Iran retaliated by closing the Strait of Hormuz on March 2nd. Now, this is a passage barely 30 kilometers wide at its tightest point. Through that choke point flows roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil every single day. Every single day. When Iran shut that door, energy markets went into immediate shock and crude climbed above $112 a barrel. Trump pushed immediately for an international naval coalition to force the strait back open. He turned to NATO. NATO looked away. Now let's be precise about what that refusal actually means, because the framing matters enormously here. This was not NATO countries declining to send token forces to some peacekeeping mission in a distant region. This was NATO countries, American treaty allies, denying American military aircraft access to their airspace during an active operation. That is not abstaining from a coalition. That is sending a direct signal, and the signal reads, "We did not agree to this. We do not endorse this, and this is not our conflict." Trump heard that signal clearly, and he erupted. At a White House press conference on Monday, April 7th, he said directly, "NATO is a paper tiger. We obviously don't need them, because they haven't helped at all." Now just sit back and think about what it means when the sitting American president calls NATO a paper tiger at a formal press briefing. NATO's entire value as a deterrent rests on the belief that all 32 members show up when it matters. The moment the leader of the most powerful member publicly says they are useless, every adversary on the planet takes note. And it did not stop there. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt publicly framed the Iran campaign as a test, and she announced the alliance had failed it. Now consider what that framing actually means. The White House is not saying allies disagreed on tactics or strategy. It is saying allies failed a loyalty test. Those are categorically different things. One is a policy dispute. The other is a verdict. And the White House chose the verdict. Then came the Truth Social post. After Trump met with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, he posted the message about Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice. 3 exclamation points. To every European capital, that post landed like a flare at midnight. Trump was connecting 2 grievances: NATO's refusal on Iran and Europe's refusal on Greenland, and treating them as the same act of betrayal. Now, a lot of people still treat Greenland as performance, as Trump doing Trump, and they are wrong. Let me explain why. Greenland sits at the intersection of Arctic shipping routes that are opening as polar ice retreats. It holds rare earth mineral deposits that are becoming strategically critical. And it occupies a geographic position between North America and Europe that military planners across multiple countries have been quietly flagging as essential for the better part of a decade. At the Monday press conference, Trump said this directly. It all began with, "If you want to know the truth, Greenland. We want Greenland. They don't want to give it to us." And I said, buy, now. Buy to what, exactly? That is the question every NATO capital is scrambling to answer. Now, let's talk about Mark Rutte's visit to Washington. Because what happened in and around that meeting tells you everything about where this alliance actually stands today. Rutte flew to Washington on April 8th. The official stated purpose: maintain dialogue, smooth over tensions, find common ground. The unofficial characterization, used openly and publicly by analysts on both sides of the Atlantic, this was a rescue mission. Those are the actual words being used. A rescue mission. Now, Rutte has a specific reputation in European diplomatic circles. He is known as the Trump whisperer. He has a skill for staying in the room with the American president, absorbing enormous amounts of pressure, and finding the pressure valve just before everything explodes. He negotiates where other leaders lecture. He absorbs where others walk out. After the meeting, Rutte told CNN that Trump was clearly disappointed with many NATO allies. He confirmed the discussions were very frank and very open. He said he understood the frustration. He said he pushed back on some of the broader criticism. Now translate that from diplomatic language into plain English. The conversation was brutal, Rutte absorbed it professionally, and he walked out with the alliance technically still breathing, but not in good condition. Trump's version came 3 hours later. On Truth Social, Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice. Now, Rutte flew to Washington specifically to de-escalate. Trump's first public act after that meeting was to escalate on the same platform he always uses. And here's the detail that makes this even more alarming. Back in January, Trump told reporters he and Rutte had reached what he called the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland. Something had been agreed. Something was moving forward. Now, 3 months later, that framework appears completely gone. Trump is back to all caps demands. The framework evaporated. Now, here is where the situation moves from diplomatic crisis to concrete measurable threat. The Wall Street Journal reported this week that Trump is actively considering relocating American military bases away from NATO countries that refuse to support the Iran campaign, and transferring that military infrastructure to countries that were more cooperative. Now, 84,000 American troops are currently spread across Europe. Let that number land for a moment. 84,000 troops. Those troops and the bases that house them are not symbols. They are the physical architecture of European security. Decades of infrastructure, intelligence integration, and command relationships built layer by layer since the 1950s. Imagine pulling even a fraction of that. It does not just reduce military capability, it signals to every adversary on the continent that Article 5 means something different than it used to. Now here is the part analysts are emphasizing clearly this week. Trump does not even need to formally withdraw from NATO to destroy what NATO is. Former Italian ambassador to NATO, Stefano Stefanini, stated it directly. He doesn't need to leave NATO to undermine it. By just saying he might, he has already eroded its credibility as an effective alliance. That erosion is already measurable in real time. Polish officials are openly questioning whether Article 5, the mutual defense clause that commits every NATO member to treat an attack on one as an attack on all, is still a reliable guarantee. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz publicly called the situation a transatlantic stress test. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace published analysis this week, stating plainly that the alliance may survive, but in a radically different form. Now, radically different means Europe defends itself, with or without Washington. That conversation was largely theoretical 2 to 3 years ago. It is not theoretical anymore. European defense ministries are accelerating procurement, increasing spending, and renegotiating command structures with urgency that simply was not present before Operation Epic Fury. And Russia is watching. That is the factor every serious analyst keeps returning to. Every signal Trump sends that Article 5 is conditional, that the American umbrella only extends to allies who comply with American foreign policy decisions, is a signal Russia receives and files away. The Baltic states specifically, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, countries that border or sit directly adjacent to Russian territory, are now asking a harder version of a question they were already asking. What does the American security guarantee actually guarantee today? This is the second-order consequence of what looks like a dispute over Greenland and an alliance argument over Iran. The damage does not stay contained. It radiates outward into the security calculations of every government on the European continent. Now, there is one more piece of this picture you need to have. Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire in the Iran conflict this week. The announcement came after more than a month of active operations. It is framed as a pause, a diplomatic window, a chance for Strait of Hormuz tensions to stabilize. Now, a 2-week ceasefire does not reset what happened to the alliance. The airspace refusals already happened. The route visit already happened. The Truth Social post is already up, and it is not coming down. What the ceasefire does is give every government a brief window to decide what the next move actually is. For Trump, maximum pressure. Greenland as a permanent grievance. Base relocations as a concrete lever. Public framing of NATO as a failed institution. For European allies, accelerating whatever version of strategic independence can actually be built in time. Defense industries, procurement pipelines, command structures, those take years, in some cases a decade. Now, here is what we know for certain right now. A sitting American president publicly called NATO a paper tiger at a formal press briefing. His press secretary called the alliance's behavior a test it failed. The Wall Street Journal reported he is actively discussing base relocations and separately full withdrawal from NATO. And after a damage control meeting with the NATO Secretary General, Trump's first public act was to demand Greenland again in all caps with 3 exclamation points. Now, that is not a country drifting away from an alliance. That is a country whose president is actively, publicly, and deliberately questioning whether that alliance should exist in its current form, with its current members, under its current rules. 77 years, that is how long this held together. Through the Cold War, through the collapse of the Soviet Union, through the Balkans, through Afghanistan, through Ukraine, it held through all of that. Whether it holds through a president who treats every alliance commitment as a transaction to be renegotiated in real time, that is a question nobody can answer with confidence right now. Now, here's the thing about what has already happened that you cannot reverse. Once an alliance starts debating its own credibility in public, it has already conceded something that is very hard to take back. Investors know this. Central banks know this. And adversaries know this better than anyone. Russia does not need to move a single soldier to benefit from this situation. It simply needs to wait and watch as the damage compounds. The Baltic states are exposed. European defense budgets are years behind where they need to be. And the single most powerful deterrent in human history, the American security guarantee, is being publicly questioned by the American president himself. Now, imagine you are a defense minister in Tallinn or Riga right now. You are watching this unfold in real time. Your border is 150 kilometers from Russian territory. You are asking your allies in Brussels what Article 5 actually means today. And the answer coming back is, we are not sure. That is the real consequence of this week. Not the Truth Social post, not the root meeting, not the Greenland demand. The real consequence is that the question is no longer hypothetical. The uncertainty is now official. So, let me know what you think in the comments. Will Europe actually build its own defense capability fast enough to matter? And will Trump go all the way and pull the United States out of NATO? Let me know below. Stay safe. Smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these extraordinary times.